and welcome to today's Berita Harian and Yayasan Mendaki webinar, Raising Bilingual Children. My name is Fatin, and we thank you again for your support as it has been encouraging so far. Before we begin, can I request that you have a smartphone with you, as you may need to use it during the webinar. Right, we only have 1 hour, so without further delay, I will hand over the floor to our moderator. She's the director of Mini Monsters Limited and also author of children's books. She's also a member of the Mendaki Alliance for Preschool Professionals, Ms. Rila Melati. Please.
Thank you very much, Fatin, and good morning, everyone. Selamat pagi semua para penonton hari ini. So, today's parenting webinar is organised mainly for parents with young children below the age of 6. And the focus for today's webinar is to understand about child development in the early years, followed by the challenges as well as strategies that might help you in your challenge in raising bilingual children. So, before our speakers start with their sharing, I would just want to go through a couple of housekeeping rules. Later on in between the session, we will actually have a short break in which we will be doing a simple Kahoot quiz. So we are hoping for participation later on for the Kahoot quiz. So get your mobile phones on standby for that. And also to let you know that at the end of the webinar today, we will be doing a Q&A segment. And you can actually prepare your questions as you move along with the discussions. Today, we will be more than happy, the guests will be more than happy to answer your questions. And this being a bilingual session, nak tanya soalan dalam bahasa, dua-dua bahasa pun boleh, Malay and English. We welcome that. And yeah, that's about it. I think without further ado, I think we shall begin our session today, and our first speaker for this morning is Dr. Rauda Yahya. She is a lecturer from the National Institute of Early Childhood Development, NIEC, and she will be sharing more about child development in the early years. So, Dr. Rauda, please.
Thank you, Ms. Rila. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, thank you. Thank you for making the time to be with us today. We know that it's Sunday morning. Sunday mornings are always precious. So we know that and we appreciate that. Okay. Let's get on to the topic for our seminar today. Okay. Raising a bilingual child is easy. Is it a fact? Is it a myth? Now we want to hear from you because, we cannot see you. So at least we get some responses from you. So let's take a poll, okay? Can we have the QR code? So what you can do is grab your phone and then you can scan the QR code. Now don't use the trace together scanner because that's not going to work, okay? It's the normal scanner, okay? Or I think if you go to the chat, there's going to be a link, www.menti.com. And then you can click on the link and then join the poll. We have already people participating in the poll. Right, for those who are still joining, you can have the you have the QR code there. So we can see the bar chart moving, and which one is leading? The myth is leading. So it looks like quite a number of people are saying that the webinar topic, the raising a bilingual child is a myth. So it's fake news, is it? So, okay, so let's stop the poll. Okay, let's get back to the slides. Oops, okay. So, what's the correct answer then for the poll? Well, actually there's no correct answer. It really depends on how you define what a bilingual child is. Okay, so what do you mean by a bilingual child? So I'm going to discuss 3 types of bilinguals. The first one is the passive bilingual. It means that this person knows 2 languages, okay, and can understand 2 languages, But with one of the language, this person is able to listen, to understand, but is not able to respond in that language or express himself or herself in that language. So we call it a passive bilingual because it's one way. It's just I'm just receiving and listening, but I'm not able to respond and express myself. So of course, that's not the objective for bilingualism, right? The second one, it's the dominant bilingual. Dominant bilingual means that we know two languages. We can communicate in two languages, but one language dominates over the other. That means we are more comfortable, we are more fluent in one language over the other. So I think most of us would actually fall into that category, right? And the third one is the balanced bilingual. Balanced bilingual means that the person is highly fluent in both languages, almost like native speakers for both languages. So that will be actually the ideal bilingual, to be very fluent in both languages. So when we want, what do we mean by raising a bilingual child? It would mean that we want the child, first of all, to hit that at least that dominant bilingual status, right? And then moving towards the balanced bilingual. Okay, so let's move on. Now, raising an effectively bilingual child is achievable, inshallah. I didn't say it's easy, okay? I say it's achievable. And then we have conditions. What do we need to understand to achieve this? So one of it is that we need to understand why we need to start from early childhood stage. Okay. We always hear this thing. Early childhood stage is very important. It lays the foundation for learning. Make sure that your child gets quality early childhood education from as young as 3 years old. But why? Why is it so important? Why is it a critical period during that early childhood? Do we just accept it as a fact, or do we need to understand why? Okay, it's such a critical or important stage of life. And then we need to know the process of language acquisition for children, so that when we understand it, then we know why we're applying the strategies, and we can be flexible about it according to our understanding of that process. Okay, and the third point is the practical side. Like, so, what do we do? Okay, so I'll be covering these 3 points, and then Prof. Roxana will be covering the part on bilingualism. She'll delve into it, and she will share strategies on bilingual acquisition. Okay, so brain size growth. Okay, now when we were born, our brain is about like a quarter of the adult size. Okay, and then within that 2 years, there's this growth spurt that the brain is like almost 3/4 of the adult brain. And but by the time the child reaches about 6 years old, it's about almost the size of the adult brain, about 90%. Now that means that there is this rapid growth, rapid physical growth of the brain during that period, right? But what's more important is that it's not just a physical growth. Alongside with that rapid growth of that physical growth is also the rapid development of the function of the brain. And that's what we want to know more about. Okay, so I'm going to make it very simplified here. Let's talk about the synapse. That is the gap in between the two pink diagrams that you can see. So what happens is that when our brain gets stimulated, okay, so that synapse gets activated, okay, and the more stimulation you get, okay, that synapse, that connection gets stronger. Now what happens when you have a stronger connection? It means that your brain or the information can flow very effectively, very fast in the brain, okay. So that's how we want to get that, smart brain, that very effective, brain. So we want that stimulation. Now, what happens when the brain doesn't get that stimulation? Okay, when that synapse doesn't get activated, what happens is that there will be elimination. That's called pruning. So if a certain part of the brain, the child doesn't get that stimulation, then pruning will occur, and the function of that will cease. Okay, so that's not what we want to happen. Okay, so in a nutshell, why is early childhood so important? Because of the rapid brain growth, be it the physical growth as well as the function, the brain function that's rapid, that's going on during the early years of life, and we want to maximize that period. So in conjunction to that, that's why learning is better at a younger age. Not that as adults we cannot learn at all. It's just that in order for us to reach the same learning outcome, okay, our brain needs more stimulation. We just have to work harder and put in more effort to get just to that level of what the child can achieve with less stimulation. Okay. Okay, and so what about language? When do we start then? As early as possible, because from research findings, it has been seen that there is this effects of early exposure of language as young as 6 to 8 months. That means when they did this research with babies, the babies showed that recognition of language that they've been exposed to from birth to 6 months by paying more attention to that language. And the same goes to if the baby is exposed to 2 languages right from birth. Okay. So let's talk about the process of language acquisition, just an overview. Okay. So from birth, we have this blueprint to be more sensitive to the human voice. Okay. And you know, with each language, they have their own unique sounds, right? And we are receptive from birth on the unique sounds of the language. Here, I want to share a personal experience. You know, when I was teaching in Oman, the university, the Arab students in the university, so I realized that when I was teaching and I asked them to say the word play, they cannot quite say the word play, they say blay. Okay? If we say Pepsi, then they say Bipsi. Why? It's because the Arabic language does not have the letter, the sound P. In that they have the ba, the b, but they don't have the p. So even though we tried a couple of times, they couldn't quite say out that pronunciation of the p. And I asked them, when do you start learning English? And they said, you know, for school curriculum, they start at 10 years old. Okay, that's about grade 4. So that's the importance of exposing the young children on the nuances of the sounds of each language. Okay, the next one will be, at first the babies will be like cooing, babbling. They're trying to communicate making sounds, right? Even though we cannot quite understand it. And then using pointing, which means that when we point, okay, to something, they're able to respond by looking at the object that we're pointing. So that's the first step of that communication. And then subsequently, they would point, because they cannot talk yet, so they would point to show us, to tell us something that, hey, pay attention to that object. Okay, so that's the stage of the communication. And then, of course, the first stage for preschool we should focus on the listening and the speaking skills, and then moving on to the reading and writing skills. So that's an overview of the language process development for children. So the practical side, what can we do, okay, as parents? Firstly, we can use infant-directed speech and cheerful intonation, because that appeals more to the children. If you look at how we talk to children, sometimes it's quite natural for some of us. We don't talk the way we talk to adults. Cantiknya. We tend to make it more sing-song, more exaggerated, right? And a more, sometimes a higher pitch. Okay, so that actually helps the child because it's more appealing to the babies and even for young children. Next, what we need to do is to focus on oral communication. That means we should do this serve and return interaction, like playing tennis, right? When they coo to us, we don't coo back. Okay, we use words. Okay, we don't babble back. So we use words. Oh yeah, so you like this. Like, even though we don't quite understand, but we engage in a conversation with them. Okay, so there's this. That's the part on the serve and return interaction before we teach reading and writing. The other important thing that's often overlooked is the social and emotional development. This is actually the most crucial development at this early stage, because in order for the child to learn well, to develop well, the child must feel happy, must feel safe. Safe, that means the child is not afraid of making mistakes, not in a threatening environment, and the child must have high self-esteem. That means, thank you. And the other one is also, we need to acknowledge and accept that each child has his or her own developmental trajectory. Now, we need to be clear about this, that if we put in the same effort, exactly the same, for two children, we cannot compare and say, why is it that this second one is not achieving the same one as the first one? Because they have their own developmental trajectory. And we have to have faith in that as long as they are making progress, is good. We don't have to compare with, the other siblings or the cousins or, our friends' children. So acknowledge and accept. So this Sunday morning, it seems, I hope you're not getting like information overload from me, but if you feel that this is too much, just two takeaways from my talk, the two takeaways will be just two words that you need to remember from this talk, if you cannot remember anything else, that's fine, it's just two words, so the first word would be conversation. Engage in a conversation with your child. Now, conversation means two-way talking, right? If it's one-way talking, then it is not conversation. It's probably called nagging, right? For preschool, we always have this thing about surprise element. So normally when you talk to a child, you can talk about anything else, anything that interests the child, but you can also use an object, So in this demo, I'm just going to use Malay language, and I'm going to pretend I have a son named Ali, So, Ali, tengok ni apa? So, probably, Ali might say chicken, betul tu, ayam. Macam mana Ali tahu ni ayam? Huh? I don't understand, Mommy. How do you know that it's chicken? Oh, it has wings. Betul tu, sebab ayam ni ada kepak. If you notice in that conversation, I didn't correct that child no, it's not chicken, it's ayam. Now Mommy is talking Malay. I say Malay. Bukan chicken, ayam. Kan kita cakap Melayu sekarang. I didn't correct, but it's an indirect teaching of the child on what is the Malay word for it. And I keep saying, yes, it's correct, because you want to give the encouragement of conversation to that child. So that's conversation. That's the first word that you need to remember from my takeaway. The second one is read. Yes, read with the child. So we have, I brought a book also. So now in this, what I would like to share is the approach that we use in preschool, which is called the shared book approach, which you might want to use. So it has 3 steps. The first step is you focus on the illustrations. You talk about the illustrations with the child. So you can say Ali again. So Ali, tengok ni, apa Ali nampak? Ni macam atuk kan? Atuk tu pegang apa? So it's, if you see, I'm using a very casual language. I don't go talking to my child, my pretend child. Apakah yang anda nampak di dalam buku ini? Then the child might feel like, what, is this like a school? And my mom is, it's like another school session. So it's an informal engagement of reading with the child. So that's the first one. Focus on illustration, and you can talk about the illustrations in the book. Do you need to cover all the pages? No. Can the child talk about stories that's not really about it's not the storyline? It's fine. We want to engage in visual literacy so that the child is able to make meaning from the illustrations. Then the second step is to focus on the text. Okay, and so we read payung atau adil. Okay, and as we read, we will read and point. Okay, Datuk ada satu payung. So and we point. So we want to show the child what's the correct way to read, and we can do that a couple of days. Yes, another thing is this. You don't have to don't do the illustrations and the text on the same day. Okay, so we do it at another time. Okay, and also a very, very important thing, okay, if you want to instill reading, is that don't force the child. Do you need to complete the book? No. If the child is losing interest, if the child is tired, if the child is, you can see like getting restless, then stop. You do not want the child to relate that experience with something that's unfavorable, because that will affect the emotional part of the child, and then the child sees it as another session that I'm forced to sit through. Okay, so that's the part, and we can do it a couple of times. So that's the second step. The third step is when we see the understanding of the child. We want the child to be the storyteller. So now we ask the child to tell the story to us. Never mind if it deviates from the actual storyline. Okay, or we can actually do some role play. Mari kita ambil payung. Okay, mari kita buat macam buku cerita tadi. Or doing some craft related to the book. So there's an extension of that book. So those are the three steps for shared book approach that I want to share with you today. So if it's like a lot of information, just remember 2 takeaways, 2 words. What are they? Number 1 is conversation. Number 2 is read. And that's all for my talk today. Thank you for your attention. So I'll pass over to our moderator, Ms. Rila.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rauda, for that very, very insightful sharing. Took me down memory lane when my son was a toddler. And that was a surprise sharing of the book as well. Thank you. Yes, and before we move on to our next speaker, now is the time where we will take our short break. So we are going to do a little quiz with Kahoot, right? So parents, if you can stand by with your mobile phones and follow the instructions on the screen, the questions will be displayed on the screen and you would have to choose the answer on your own mobile device. If you are ready, let's go. We will finally get to see the question. So question number 1 first.
We have 2 people getting it right.
Getting it right? Is that, oh yeah, the red one.
Srinivasan.
And that's one person. What is this game called? Question number 2. Oh, 10 seconds. Yes, right. Yeah. Ting ting, 5 stones, chapte, and kuti kuti. And then ting. Lock in the answers. 5 stones. I think almost everyone.
Yes.
Everyone gets it right for this one.
Wow, Srinivasan is leading.
Yes. We have the scoreboard here.
Okay, let's get on to our third question.
What is the Malay word for butterflies? Adakah ianya lipan, kerengga, rama-rama atau cicak? Jawapannya ialah ting 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 ting. Rama-rama.
Hampir semua yang betul. Yang salah tu mungkin tersalah tekan.
Wow, 3 questions only. Okay, so we're done with all 3 questions. Yay! So those are your winners. So the champion for Kahoot quiz is Akila. Wow, Akila, tahniah Akila. Followed by Isha, second place winner, and me. And third prize winner. No, there's no prize. Okay, so first, second, third. Okay, so those are our winners for Raising Bilingual Children's Webinars Kahoot quiz. Wonderful. Okay, so moving on. Thank you very much for your participation. That was quite a fun break, Dr. Rauda. Thank you for the Kahoot quiz. I hope you're all refreshed and we're ready with our next speaker. So let me introduce our second speaker, Dr. Roxana Bibi Binti Abdullah. She is an associate professor from Asian Languages and Cultures at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University. She will be sharing more about challenges in nurturing bilingualism in young children and the strategies by scholars on how to overcome them. So if we can have Dr. Roxana, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rila. Parents, thank you for joining us on this beautiful Sunday. You sacrifice your beautiful Sunday morning with us. Thank you so much. And Dr. Rauda had shared 3 concepts just now about passive bilingual, dominant bilingual, and balanced bilingual. Let me share 2 more concepts. Simultaneous bilingualism and sequential bilingualism. Okay, simultaneous bilingualism is learning of 2 languages at the same time, concurrently. At birth, since birth, or before age 3, whereas sequential bilingualism is the learning of language A first, followed by language B. So one language at a time. So I will come back to these 2 concepts later on. So I just need parents to remember these 2 concepts, simultaneous bilingualism or sequential bilingualism. Yeah. English, parents, maybe I can just skip this one. We know how important English is. Everybody need to understand English. If you send your children to school, if they have no knowledge of English language, you will start to worry about many things like, can my child understand what the teacher is teaching and so on. So before I go on, we very quickly we take a look at this data. This is something that I quoted from Singapore Statistics Department. So I must declare that it's not my work. This is something that I quoted, the census that was conducted by the Singapore Statistics Department. From this chart, we can see that the percentage of Malay language family who use Malay at home has decreased. We are focusing on the Malay community now. Yeah, other communities are facing the same issue, but we are focusing on Malay community for this talk. And likewise, this graph is also the source is taken from Straits Times, and the data is actually collected by Ministry of Education, which shows that the percentage of Malay families who use Malay mostly at home had increased. If you are to look, in 1999, for example, 18% of the Malay families reported that they use English mostly at home, and in 2019 the number had increased tremendously to 67%. Okay, this is just some background studies that I wish to share. And parents, why is that so? Parents will normally worry, what language should I use at home? whether English or Malay, or I use both languages. These are the kind of dilemma that almost all parents will face. Yeah, so normally when we don't speak English, we tend to worry, will my child be able to understand his or her teacher? Will my son or my daughter show some signs of inferiority complex if they can't speak English? They cannot socialize with their peers. And will that also mean that my child will fail in their examination? So everybody know that English is really very important and start, to use English at home. And the next slide will also show, these are some of the justification given by parents when I conducted a small research a few years back, which shows that parents have shared that if they don't speak English to their children will fail. Their children will have issues when they go to school. So like it or not, doesn't matter the level of their language or their English language proficiency, parents seem to take charge or to feel that they are responsible to use English at home. Yeah, so the question that we need to ask ourselves, if we feel responsible to teach English at home, are we ready? Do we have enough knowledge or language proficiency to teach our children? Yeah, so if I go back to the topic of this seminar, we know that to raise a bilingual child, just want to try to ask the same question, whether it's easy or it's a myth or it's difficult. I can tell you that it is not easy to raise a bilingual child. It is not easy. But at the same time, it is also not impossible. Yeah, we have so many success stories. Parents raise bilingual child and their children, are effective bilingual. So like the saying goes, kalau hendak seribu daya, kalau tidak mau seribu dalih. So when there's a will, there's a way, parents. So we should first look at this. Now we are going to look at the strategy. Okay, if you are to ask me what will be the best strategy to raise a bilingual child, okay, the answer will be there's no one size fits all strategy, parents. Yeah, there's no one size fits all strategy. We need to ukur baju di badan sendiri. That means you need to do things that is within your abilities. Yeah. Each bilingual family have their own circumstances, their own challenges. So there's no one strategy that will be able to be used by all parents and you expect the same results. Yeah, that will not happen at all parents. So before we decide on what language to use at home, what we can do is we do short or a small assessment, self-assessment on our own language proficiency. Yeah, before making decision, we ask ourselves, where do we put ourselves? Whether our language ability is high, we are able to communicate confidently in language A or language B, be it English and Malay or any other languages, and from there, then only we decide. Yeah. And I think parents, you are quite familiar with family planning. Everybody knows what's family planning. But what I want everybody to think about now is to think of family language planning. Yeah, you need to also plan the language that you will use at home with your children. If you plan carefully, definitely to achieve that, to raise a bilingual child will be very much easier. Yeah. And this is a simple model that you can consider before deciding on language, home language. Yeah. So where do you put yourself, parents, for two languages, for example, Malay and English? Do you have very high or native language proficiency or near native language proficiency in Malay? And likewise for English, or you only have elementary proficiency or no proficiency at all in either language. So you decide where do you put yourself. After you decide on that, then only you you choose which language to use. Yeah. So for case A, for example, parents with high Malay language proficiency, but very low or no English language proficiency. So for such group of parents, yeah, I would suggest for the parents to please speak your mother tongue or your native language at home. And you need to start that at the birth of your child. Yeah, start as soon as possible. Yeah, and because we're non-native English speakers or low English proficiency level speakers use English at home, you will create a lot of problem for the child. Yeah, it will be poor grammar. You will end up confuse the children further. So, because young children will benefit much more if parents are to use the language which they are really very, very strong in. Yeah, so for parents who have low language proficiency in English, this is it's not something that I say, but this is something that most of the scholars who have done extensive research in bilingualism claim that children will do better at learning English in school if you keep speaking your mother tongue or native language at home. So you must tap on the language that you know best, yeah? Because solid base in their first language will make it easier for them to acquire the second one. Yeah, the first language, which is strong foundation, they have very solid base in language A. In this case, if it's your mother tongue, that will really help them to acquire English later on in their life. Yeah. So parents, for this category, you can read aloud. Dr. Rauda had already shared. Yeah, read aloud, sing songs. You use nursery rhymes, Malay nursery rhyme, tell stories, and the most important thing is expose the language to your child. Yeah, in your native language. Yeah, so that the children will get rich and complex language exposure. And you may ask, what about English? What will happen to my child if I only speak mother tongue at home? Parents, don't worry. You can draw external resources. Yeah, you can get help from friends, from relatives, from teachers, and you may explore the rich resources by reading bilingual storybooks, sending your children for enrichment courses. You know, we have so many private institutions which provide enrichment courses in languages. So you will actually raise a bilingual child, but it will be sequential bilingual. Yeah, because you tap on the first language first, teach them and make sure that they have a strong foundation in your mother tongue, followed by another language at a later stage. Yeah, so that will be a sequential bilingualism. In the end, you will still raise bilingual child. Yeah, doesn't mean that you are neglecting the other language, because our children will normally easily pick up the other language that is being used by their peers. Yeah, because this is a form of survival of the fetus. They'll be able to cope with another new language later on. You don't have to worry about it. Yeah, okay. So for parents, the other group of parents who have high ability or high proficiency in English and high proficiency in Malay. So for this group of parents, by all means, parents use two languages from the start. Yeah. So because so many research had shown that so many children grow up learning two languages concurrently at the same time, and they finally end up being effective bilinguals. Yeah, and you can try one parent, one language. As I said earlier, that there's no one strategy that can fit all. There's no one size fits all kind of strategy. So if you are to try one parent, one language, please also consider the time that you spend with your child. For example, if parent A only spend like half an hour or 1 hour with the children, whereas another parent spend like 8 hours, so this strategy will not work. Yeah. So, so depends if you have a balanced exposure of both languages, then by all means, one parent, one language will work. Otherwise, you may want to consider using different language on different days. For example, you have Malay Day, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday will be Malay Day, yeah, or Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday will be English Language Day, and yeah, weekends will be Malay Language Day. That will be one way. Or you use different language for different activities. Yeah, depends on what is the activities that your children normally do at home. So decide which activity will you be using English in certain activities and Malay for the other activities. And at the same time, parents, give your child many chances to hear and practice both languages. Yeah, so the exposure is really very important. I think Dr. Rauda had already also shared the same thing, that the exposure is very crucial in early years. And learning languages involves speaking and reading, definitely. That is already being shared by Dr. Rauda. But oral language is the key milestone. So you need to speak to your children. Yeah, speak, expose the language. And expose your child to the language via verbal communication. Don't send texts, yeah. Don't ask them to read books and write messages verbal, so that they can hear you and they can also respond to you in the language that you want them to acquire. So avoid, and then at home, just now I think Dr. Rauda also had mentioned a bit about this, avoid becoming a language police. Don't police around lah, yeah. So it doesn't matter. Let your children make mistakes. Allow them. That is the learning process. Yeah, allow them to make mistakes, but as a parent, you take note of the mistakes that the children make. Yeah, so you find the right time, for example, during their play time, and repeat those sentences to help them. Yeah, the accurate, grammatically correct sentences. And please make a need for your child to speak each language. So for example, if grandparents have low proficiency in English, please advise grandparents to use Malay. Yeah, so this is really very important. Yeah, parents, make sure that the children get the opportunity to speak. Give them many platforms for them to practice the language. And yeah, so young children, this is also something that I want you to believe. Yeah, this is not a myth. You have to believe me, you have to believe the researches done by various scholars that young children around the world can and do acquire two languages simultaneously. So for parents who has strong proficiency in English, strong proficiency in mother tongue, please use two languages. Don't shun your mother tongue. Don't worry that you're going to confuse the children. They will not be confused. Their brain, just like Dr. Rauda shared about the brain, their brain is ready to acquire two languages, even three languages, in fact. Yeah. So early childhood is the best possible time to learn languages. Compared to an adult learner, they will take longer time, they'll be more confused, and they will also end up code mixing and code switching. So if your children tend to code mix and code switch, don't worry. Allow them. That is the learning process. That is not the negative consequence of learning two languages. Yeah, time is up for me, parents. I'm so sorry. I've got to stop here. Back to you, Rila. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roxana. That was a very, very enlightening sharing. I love what you just shared with us, the tips, and then as well as the strategies, and then both of you gave us very good takeaways, especially the point you brought up about creating semi-lingual. Yeah. Yes, I think that's something that I think we all should be wary of.
Yes, yes. The child will be neither here nor there.
Yes.
A bit of Malay and a bit of English. So they
That's
don't
right.
have strength in any. They are master of none. So that is something that we really need to avoid.
Yes, that's right. Dalam bahasa mudahnya semi-lingual ni dia setengah masak. Kan? Setengah masak. English pun tak bagus, Melayu pun tak jalan. So that is what we're trying to avoid here in giving you the tips so that we have a child that is more wholesome and more confident in being bilinguals. Okay, so I think we are good to move on to our next segment, which is the Q&A. Yay! Favorite segment of the day. Okay, we will now begin to take our Q&A. Parents, if you can just write your questions via the Q&A function, and we will be able to actually see it from here and answer your questions. Are we good with the questions? Are there any questions coming in already? Oh, okay, we've got some coming in. And I think we will be looking at the Q&A questions first before we look at the chats. Yeah, because I think it's just coming in now. So back to semilinguals. While we're waiting for the questions to come in. Semilinguals, how much of a problem is this when they go into primary one?
The teachers will have issues. Semilinguals means they make a lot of grammatical mistakes in English and also in Malay. So instead of starting from ground zero, like you nak mencorak kain putih, you know, it'll be easy. Rather than you need to wash first the kain and then, you know, corakkan.
Right.
So if they make a lot of mistakes, they have acquired language which is not grammatically accurate, that will pose a big problem to the teachers.
Because it's harder to undo, right?
Undo, yeah.
It's much harder to undo than to use a method to instill is so much easier than later on having to undo it. Okay, number one question. If we respond in Malay and then translate in English, will the child be dependent on the translation to comprehend and will not continue to converse in Malay? Any one of you would like to take that question?
Okay. No, I'm making an assumption that this child is more comfortable in English, right? Okay. So and then the question is being asked to the parent, and then the parent respond in Malay, right? Now the question is this: language, other than it encompasses culture and all that, language is for communication, right? So if you see that, then if you do not want to respond in Malay, what are you going to do? You're going to respond in English only. Then you will not use the Malay language, right? But if you're going to respond in Malay, right, and you don't translate, what happens then? Do you think that the child will be able to understand? If the child is able to understand, then don't translate. Okay? But if you're going to respond in Malay, and then you don't want to translate, and they don't understand it, then where is that communication? Now, in preschools, we also have these issues of children coming in, and they can only understand English. Okay, our Malay children. So what happens is that the teachers say, okay, mari kita berdiri. Then none of the children stood up. Okay, so what is the teacher's gonna do? The first thing is we don't translate actually. What we can do is if we can show the action, we show the action. Okay, translation is only if it's something that you cannot show the action, and so you really want to convey the meaning. So you have to translate in English so that the child understands. And then when you say in Malay, okay, the child actually can hear that. That's listening. Okay, remember listening is one of the skills that we want to pick up first before they can talk. Don't assume that when they listen, they don't absorb. As they listen, they're actually absorbing your Malay words. So, yeah. I hope I answered that question.
Yep, very thoroughly. Thank you very much. There's one question that's also very interesting here because I wanted to ask you also on this question actually. How to convince grandparents they need to speak, how to convince grandparents they need to speak Malay with the children? Because I think the role of grandparents these days, you have... I think you're very familiar with that, where grandparents are forced or rather reluctantly, or grandparents try and speak English to the children, but grandparents themselves end up being semi-lingual, right? So I have seen the product of children who actually grow with grandparents who actually speak to them in Malay, and they grow up being very good bilingual. So maybe the role of grandparents and how to convince them to speak Malay to their grandchildren.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Rila. Okay, for grandparents, that's why I say it is really very important to come up with a family language planning. You have got to start from very beginning, since the child is young. When you plan the family language, so you will decide who speak what to the child. And from that level, that moment, you need to tell the grandparents that they have to use Malay when they talk to their children. Yeah, because sometimes the grandchildren will not respond. For example, if at age 5 or 6, if parents are using only English at home, they cannot understand. So there's a case if we are to see how orang asli, for example in Malaysia, yeah, the orang asli, the older generation will not respond to their grandchildren or great-grandchildren in other language except for their native language. So they insist on using their native language. So in the beginning it's difficult. The child will not understand, they will ignore, they will be quiet. But when there's a need, so parents have to create the need for the children to speak to the grandparent. And the grandparent need to be advised that only use one language, no matter what happen. Kalau tak kiamat, bahasa Melayu je.
Yeah.
For example, you see? So only kiamat aja, then you can use other language. So if you come up with such strategy, then you see the grandparents will use only one language. And sooner or later you can see that the children, will tend to converge to the grandparents' language. So if they diverge, you just keep quiet. So that's what the orang asli people did, the older generation. They die use only one language.
I think my father might have learned from the orang asli. Because that's what he does to my child. You come to my house, you are under my roof, you speak my language.
Yeah,
So he refused to speak in any other language. So yeah, I can so relate to your orang asli example. Yes. Okay, the next question. Most, if not all, subject deliveries in school are in English. What would happen if we focus on Malay in the first 1 to 6 years? Would that put the child a little bit behind in comprehension or understanding of the English delivered subjects in P1 to P3? Well, this is a very specific question. Yeah.
If we look at the environment in Singapore itself, right? There's already in balance in terms of the stimulation that the brain would get, the child's brain would get in the two languages, right? There'll be a lot of English, be it in the cartoon, on the games, or in their communication with their cousins. So actually, if you do want to speak totally in Malay at home, okay, if that is your choice, like family language planning, right? What happens is that there is also the exposure of English that the child is getting elsewhere. So in a way, the child is exposed to both languages.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Roda.
The last question.
And then, yes, that's right. That's a good question, actually. Could you advise if we should start conversational Malay or grammatically correct Malay in the early stages? Yang mana satu bahasa perbualan ataupun bahasa yang betul-betul tata bahasa dia betul?
Okay, to answer that, as Malay language speakers, we know there's variation in Malay language. Ya, bahasa Melayu ada variasi. Likewise, English have their own variations as well. For Malay, we have Bahasa Melayu Pasar, we have Bahasa Melayu Basahan or colloquial Malay, we have Bahasa Melayu Standard, which is Bahasa Melayu Baku. So at home environment, we should use conversational Malay. You will not confuse. We all grow up in using Bahasa Melayu Basahan, and we are not confused when we go to school. You will know that this is the type or the language that you use at home in this domain, in this context. But when you're in formal context, there's another register that you need to use. So they will understand naturally. So you don't kill the beauty of the language. Yeah, you don't kill the beauty of the language. Whereas Bahasa Melayu Basahan is the natural setting whereby people are comfortable in a relaxed moment. Sudahkah kamu makan? Belum. Kenapa kamu belum makan? Saya sudah masak. Lauk itu akan dibuang kalau kamu. So you see, that is not how we speak at home. Yeah. You see? Kenapa tak makan? Kan mak dah masak. So that is something in a relaxed moment. So the tone when you tend to use baku or when you use standard, you will be very formal. And the child will be, alamak, I'm always 24 hours in a school setting. You see? So don't be teachers at home, parents. Try to teach your children the variety, the beauty of Malay language. So use Bahasa Melayu Basahan or colloquial Malay, or what you mentioned as conversational Malay.
Okay, yes. Thank you. If code switching is fine, where do we draw the line? Will it become a habit permanently in the long run? Or maybe we can explain what code switching is in the first place, because some of the audience members might not know what code switching is. Yep.
Code switching is switching from one language to another. Normally, adults do code switch when they want to emphasize on certain things. For example, they feel that if they are to mention or to use an English word, you know, it is the degree of emphasis is higher if they are to choose Malay. So they code switch, you know, from English to Malay or from Malay to English in one sentence or in one text. You know, they use two languages. So code switching can be between two languages, or in fact more than two languages is also possible. So we can say that during this age, when children acquire two languages, when you expose the children with two languages, allow them to make mistake, allow them to code switch and code mix, you know, to mix two languages, because that is actually the learning process. Even adults code switch and code mix. So allow them, after a certain period when they know that they have to use, they will acquire that. After age 7, 8, and you know, when they grow bigger, they will be able to have a good grasp of both languages, and they will know which language to use in which context. Yeah.
So speaking two languages in the same sentence may
That
not necessarily be a bad thing, right? That's code
It's not
switching.
a bad thing.
Yeah.
That is the process of learning.
Right.
Yeah. If you are to read, many researchers have said that allow your children to code switch, allow them to code mix, because that is a learning process, not the negative effect of exposing two languages to your children.
So apakah perbezaannya code switching dengan semilinguals?
Okay,
sebab semilinguals dia kan setengah masak both languages, not strong in both languages. But when we say code switching, two languages in the same sentence may not necessarily tata bahasa dia tak
Tata
betul.
bahasa dia kacau. Kalau semilingual, English, our English is not, we are not fluent in English, for example. Our proficiency level is quite low. Then we will end up using English which is not grammatically correct. And the children will acquire that.
Okay, contoh.
Contohnya, you can eat, tapi, okay, that one is code mixing, sorry. You can eat lah, you know, don't play, take this and go and eat. So these are very grammatically, ungrammatically sentences that you utter in English, that will be acquired by the child. Don't play. Go there, come here first, and so on. So there are so many phrases or sentences which is not grammatically correct. So when the child acquire that, that's how they will speak in English with their peers. So they will acquire that, and they think that is the accurate grammar. Yeah. So to correct that, teachers will have problem. You know, like using incorrect gender when speaking to a female or a male, you know, using inaccurate or different tenses, past tense, present tense, they get mixed up. So parents who have low proficiency, they will tend not to give so much attention to tenses.
Right.
Right. So if this is acquired by your children, they will be semilingual.
Right.
Yeah.
Although,
semilingual, bahasa ini pun tak bagus, grammatically salah. It's not mixing.
Yeah, it is not code switching,
Not
but
code
it is the
switching.
grammar yang kita
Yeah.
tekankan. Yeah, in which in semilinguals the grammar yang bahasanya rosak.
Yeah.
Whereas in code switching, everything is fine. They are so good in being bilinguals.
Yeah, and they can
actually,
switch.
They can switch at any time. Yeah, that's true. And sometimes even for us as adults.
Yeah, we will code switch. And
We will
mix.
code switch every other time. Like in this
It's true.
session, for
Yes,
example,
yes,
we
we
code
did.
switch we code switched so many times ourselves. But I think as mothers, we tend to code switch when we scold our children. Nothing beats scolding your children in your mother tongue. Like I always scold my child, Nadim, senang hati, eh? Because like, how do you translate senang hati? Senang hati encompasses, you know, the nuances of sindiran, ada, apa semua ada. So sometimes it's, you know, you tend to code switch because of the like what you said, the context. Okay, does it benefit the child if we keep feeding them with technologies such as phone and tablets to teach phonics or watch educational videos? As I don't allow my child screen time, but the school does it. Technology and language.
So you're talking about technology at preschool stage. Okay. Actually, technology is a useful thing for in a child's learning, but it's a matter of how we use it. Okay, and I kind of noticed this thing, keep feeding. So it makes me like, oh, is it like a lot of frequency of that? Now, what is not okay if the child is just with the phone all the time? Okay, and that's the only interaction of that child with the object, a non-human interaction. But I believe that will not be happening in school, as in the teacher is not going to give the phone to the child and say, okay, here, learn phonics. What we do in school is, yes, we use, the, whether it's the laptop or whatever, but we have actions that go with it, the songs and all that. So there's this human interaction, and the technology helps in that learning.
Okay. Do we have time for a last question, or? Oh, that was the last question. Okay, that was the last question. Thank you very much, Dr. Rauda. And we have come to the end of our Q&A segment, and we would like to thank all of you for having stayed with us throughout this session. We hope you have benefited from it with all the takeaways from our very special guest this morning. And now I shall hand the mic over to our MC for the day, which is Fatin.
Thank you, Ms. Rila. All right, thank you everyone for your active participation in today's webinar. We hope that today's discussion has given us better insights into how to nurture bilingual children. At this juncture, allow me to introduce to you some of Berita Harian's as well as Mendaki's programs. The first one we have is Kelas Matematika, or KMM for short. KMM is a community program for parents with young children aged 4 to 6 years old. It's a parent-child program to empower parents with mediated learning in our children to get them ready for school. The second program I'd like to share is the Mendaki Tuition Scheme, which is MTS for short. It aims to provide quality tuition at affordable rates to help students attain better results in their school and national exams. MTS is open to all primary and secondary Muslim students. Please do visit the Mendaki website to find out more information about MTS. We also encourage you to register your child for Mendaki Tuition Scheme 2021. You can just scan the QR code that's on the screen and complete the survey to indicate your interest in the program. Right. Because today's webinar is raising bilingual children, right? So I shall, switch to Bahasa Melayu for a bit to introduce some of Berita Harian's programs. Antara program yang ingin kami ketengahkan adalah sesi Facebook Live dengan tema Hey Fam. Can we get the next slide? Sorry. Okay, so Hey Fam adalah sesi Facebook Live Berita Harian yang akan membincangkan tentang isu-isu berkaitan keluarga. Dan antara tamu khas pada Facebook Live ini, kami telah mengundang pakar motivasi daripada Seberang Tambak, Datuk Dr. Muhammad Fazila Kamsah, yang akan berkongsi tip membina keluarga berdaya tahan. Selain itu, pasangan selebriti Huda Ali dan Din Sabari juga akan turut serta dalam Facebook Live ini, di mana mereka akan berkongsi tips-tips atau bagaimana mereka kekalkan kehidupan keluarga yang harmoni. Anda boleh ikuti Facebook Live kami esok dari 8 hingga 9 malam di Berita Harian Facebook. Dan kami juga menggalak ibu bapa untuk memanfaatkan wadah online kami di www.beritaharian.sg untuk mengikuti berita terkini dan membiasakan anak-anak untuk membacalah bahan-bahan dalam bahasa Melayu. Dan usah khawatir, di laman web kami beritaharian.sg ia dilengkapi dengan translation tool yang dapat menterjemahkan ayat-ayat dalam bahasa Melayu yang tertera di dalam laman web tersebut kepada bahasa Inggeris. Okey, baiklah. Itu saja kita ada pada hari ini. Terima kasih. Thank you. Sorry, I need to code switch again. Thank you so much for joining us in today's webinar, Raising Bilingual Children. And we would appreciate if you can scan the QR code on screen to help us. And Thank you once again, and we hope to see you in our future engagements. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.